8 years ago, we purchased the farm that we're currently raising our 3 kids on. It was the farm that I grew up on as a kid, and I'd farmed on a conventional dairy farm in west central Minnesota, 320-acre dairy farm. And I was there through the 80s farming. But the 80s brought us to our knees. It was as close to bankruptcy as I want to admit. We didn't buy this farm with any intent on farming, which may sound strange. We just wanted a place to raise our kids. And we knew full well that the cash rent prices were good enough that we could continue renting the farm as my father had done to my friend Todd. And the cash rent would easily pay for the mortgage. So we looked at it as an opportunity to go home, start a market garden on the 20 acres around the homestead, go to the farmer's market, raise a few chickens, maybe a couple of steers for the freezer, and it's going to be an idyllic existence. But in the fall of 2008, a cold November day, that all changed. My friend Todd, the renter, who's paying the mortgage, called me and he said, "We're almost done with the corn harvest. You got a couple hours to ride with me as we finish up?" To me, that sounded like great fun. He had a brand new combine, beautiful machine. And we'd been watching him for the past few days pick the rest of the farm, and it had been a bumper crop. 150, 160 bushel yields, which for our part of the country is phenomenal. But as we moved into the southern part of the farm, it's a whole different situation. This is a piece of ground that was formerly a wetland, which had been tiled and drained in the 1960s. And while the tiling and draining helped immensely as far as growing corn, beans, or alfalfa, we'd had a few of those years in a row that with wet springs and wet falls, and we had water standing, and the yields had been terrible. And from the minute I set foot in that combine cab, I knew why Todd wanted me to ride along. As we inched our way across the field, I was watching the yield monitors and it showed 20, 30, 40, 50 bushels an acre. Doing the math in my head, I knew there's no way Todd could even make the cash rent payment on that kind of a yield. And then we made our way up the hillsides and I'm seeing all the gully erosion from the heavy rains that we'd been experiencing, and I'm thinking, what a mess we're making. And the ruts behind the combine were 6 to 8 inches deep, and it was just atrocious. And finally Todd turned to me and he said, "Mike, we got to do something different. I'm sick of farming this piece of your farm." I said, "Well, what do you want to do, Todd?" He said, "You've got to invest in some more tile, some more pattern tiling, and I'll at least have half a chance of getting yield off this piece of ground." Well, tiling wasn't anything that I was really interested in, because in my mind, all that did was send the water down to my neighbor, who was already inundated. This piece of ground had been a wetland. It was always going to be a wetland. So we started discussing, my wife and I, what can we do? We'd been through the Land Stewardship Program's Farm Beginnings project, and they'd presented holistic management principles that Alan Savory espouses. And I thought, boy, we got to raise cattle on this farm. And then we looked at historically what the farm had done, and going way back to the early 1900s, it was called a stock farm. You go back in the old atlases and it said stock farm on it. And we'd taken the pastures out and the fences out in the 60s. Why can't we restore the pastures? Why can't we buy some cattle? For the price of the tiling, everything, we can start our own enterprise without risking a whole lot of the farm. Let's just give it a shot. So we had a fencing system installed, a water system installed. We planted warm and cool season native grasses. The couple years of establishment were a little tough. We didn't have very many cows. Couldn't quite see the light at the end of the tunnel, but we're now there. We have a herd of over 50 cattle. Rapidly growing 20 pregnant cows, which in 2 weeks are going to start dropping calves. You need to be careful as you walk through these pastures not to step on a frog. The wildlife benefits have been phenomenal. We've experienced rainfall events of 4 or 6 inches in hours time. The past 3 years, I no longer have ponding water on this piece of ground. That's a good feeling. But most importantly, I'm providing a basis for my kids. If one of them wants to farm, we're going to have a pasture system in place that will allow them to do that. And we have dairy blood in my genetics. And if these kids can get through their heads that they want to have dairy cattle or beef cattle, I'm providing them with something where they don't have to go out on a limb in their 20s and invest a great deal of money in a farming program. And that's something that we're really happy to look to the future with.